7 out of 10 Americans polled by CBS News in December said they were struggling to pay for food, housing, and health care. 7 out of 10, that was before the war in Iran started. That was before diesel crossed $5.40. That was before gas hit $4.08. That was before the Strait of Hormuz was closed for over 5 weeks, cutting off 20% of the world's oil supply and 1/3 of all seaborne fertilizer trade. That was before the FAO issued a 3-month countdown warning on global food production. That was before the economy lost 133,000 jobs in a single month. That was before Oxford Economics modeled a scenario where the world tips into outright contraction and physical fuel rationing begins in the second half of this year. What I am about to walk you through in this video is a countdown of the 10 things that are coming this summer that most Americans have no idea about and that are already too far along in the pipeline to be stopped by any policy, any election, any ceasefire, or any intervention from Washington. These are not predictions. These are scheduled events, locked-in consequences, and mathematical certainties that are going to hit American households between June and September of 2026. And the reason I am making this video now, in April, is because the window to prepare is closing. Once these 10 dominoes start falling this summer, the people who did not see them coming are going to be the ones who absorb the full impact. And I do not want that to be you. So, let me start the countdown. Number 10. $1.50 trillion commercial real estate refinancing wave hits this summer, and your community will feel it before Wall Street does. Over $1.5 trillion in commercial real estate loans are maturing by the end of 2026, and the bulk of the refinancing deadlines land between now and September. Those loans were originated between 2018 and 2021, when interest rates were between 1 and 2.5%. They are rolling over into a rate environment where the same money costs 5 to 6%. That is not a modest increase. That is a doubling or tripling of the monthly debt service for every single building owner who has a loan coming due. And the properties securing those loans are worth less than they were when the loans were written, because office vacancies are at historic highs across the country. The shift to remote and hybrid work was not temporary, it was permanent. And the buildings that were 95% occupied in 2019 are sitting at 60 to 75% occupancy in 2026, with no recovery in sight. So you have building owners who owe more than their buildings are worth trying to refinance at interest rates that are 2 to 3 times what they originally borrowed at. The math does not work. And when the math does not work, the building defaults. The loan sits on the books of a regional bank, and regional banks are the ones that lend to small businesses, fund construction projects, provide auto loans, and issue the credit lines that keep local economies running. The Mortgage Bankers Association has been warning about this wave for over a year, and the industry publication Launch CRE confirmed that the real driver of office distress is not leasing but capital. Loans from 2018 through 2021 are maturing now, underwritten under completely different conditions. Refinancing today requires more equity, lower valuations, or lender intervention, and many owners have none of those options. And the insurance side is compounding the problem, because commercial property insurance premiums have surged, with some increases approaching 100% depending on loan structure and location, according to Unico Group. Lenders now require more comprehensive coverage, higher business income protection limits, and documented risk controls before they will even consider approving a refinance. If the building owner cannot meet those requirements, the refinance is denied and the default cascades through the banking system. And this is not a Wall Street story. This is a Main Street story. When a regional bank takes losses on commercial real estate, it tightens lending across the board. The small business owner who was going to hire 2 more people cannot get the credit line approved. The contractor who was going to build an addition on the restaurant cannot get financing. The entrepreneur who was going to open a shop on the corner gets told the money is not available right now. And the building that defaulted sits empty. Property tax revenue disappears. The municipality cuts services, and the community gets a little poorer. Multiply that by thousands of buildings across hundreds of cities this summer, and you have a slow-motion economic contraction that will not show up in GDP for months, but will be visible on your Main Street by August. Number 9. The April 30th GDP report will be the first number that tells the truth about what the war actually did to the economy, and the market is not ready. On April 30th, 2026, the Bureau of Economic Analysis releases the advance estimate for first quarter GDP. And this is going to be the single most important economic data point of the year, because it will be the first official measurement that captures the impact of the war in Iran on the American economy. Every GDP report before this one reflected an economy that existed before February 28th, before Operation Epic Fury, before the Strait of Hormuz was closed, before diesel surged 50%, before the largest oil supply disruption in history according to the IEA. The Q4 2025 number came in at 0.5%, the weakest quarter of the year, dragged down by the government shutdown that collapsed federal spending at a 16.6% annual rate. Consumer spending, which makes up roughly two-thirds of GDP, slowed from 3.5% growth in Q3 to just 1.9% in Q4. And that was the starting position before the war even began. Now, the first quarter of 2026 includes 6 weeks of the worst energy disruption since the 1970s. Diesel costs jumped 40%. Trucking capacity tightened as small operators parked their rigs. Consumer confidence collapsed, with 65% of Americans telling NerdWallet they expect a recession in the next 12 months, up 6 points from the month before. The economy lost 133,000 jobs in February, the worst monthly jobs report since the pandemic. Goldman Sachs raised its 12-month recession probability to 30%. Moody's Analytics is at 49%, EY Parthenon is at 40%, Wilmington Trust is at 45%, and JP Morgan is at 35%. Not a single major forecasting firm has the probability below 30%. And here is why April 30th matters so much for what happens this summer. If the Q1 GDP number comes in negative or even close to zero, the narrative shifts overnight. Right now, the official story is that the economy is resilient, that American consumers are spending, that growth continues, that the war is a disruption but not a crisis. A weak or negative GDP print destroys that narrative. And when the narrative changes, behavior changes with it. Consumers who are on the fence about making a big purchase decide not to. Businesses that were considering hiring decide to wait. Investors who were holding sell. And the psychological shift from "we are probably fine" to "we might be in trouble" becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that accelerates into the summer. The Dupree report noted that if the ceasefire fractures before the Strait fully reopens, the question is which economy shows up in the April 30th data. And right now, the Strait remains functionally contested. Iran has confirmed mines in the shipping lanes, traffic is at roughly 8% of normal volume. War risk insurance premiums are 20 to 40 times their pre-war levels. And the Fed's next meeting follows shortly after the GDP release. Any meaningful weakness in Q1 would intensify pressure for a rate cut, but elevated inflation limits the Fed's room to move. The Fed is trapped between an economy that needs lower rates and an inflation rate that cannot tolerate them. And the market has not priced in a negative GDP print. If it comes, the repricing will be violent. And the repricing will happen at the exact moment American families are entering the most expensive summer of their lives. Number 8. The power grid is walking into the hottest summer in years, with less capacity than it has ever had, and your electric bill is about to become your biggest expense. The Department of Energy published a report that should have been front-page news in every newspaper in America, and it was barely covered. They found that if the current pace of power plant retirements continues while AI data center demand keeps growing, blackout risk across the country could increase by 100 times, not 100%, 100 times. And the region that is most immediately at risk is the PJM interconnection grid, which serves 67 million people across 13 states from New Jersey to Illinois. PJM projects that electricity demand will grow an average of 4.8% per year over the next decade, driven almost entirely by AI data centers that consume as much power as small cities and need it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and PJM's own capacity market. The auction system that ensures there is enough generation to meet future demand has seen prices spike nearly tenfold. Those costs flow directly to consumers through higher electricity bills. In some PJM service areas, capacity cost increases alone have driven retail electricity price jumps above 15% before you even turn on a light switch. Retail electricity prices nationally have risen 42% since 2019, outpacing the 29% increase in the overall consumer price index. 1 in 5 American households now struggles to pay their electric bill, according to reporting from Utility Dive. And the strain is not abstract. AEP Ohio has paused all new data center interconnections because it does not have enough power infrastructure to support them. Virginia, where data centers consume 1 in every 5 kilowatt hours produced by the state's largest utility, is approaching a breaking point. And Stanford's Alice Hill, a former White House senior director for resilience policy, warned that extreme heat can reduce generating capacity and cause transmission lines to sag and lose efficiency, forcing grid operators into rolling blackouts. Wildfire risk prompts utilities to preemptively cut power to entire communities, and when these events compound, the consequences multiply fast. Now connect this to what is coming this summer specifically. The National Weather Service is projecting above normal temperatures across most of the continental United States for June through August 2026. That means air conditioning demand will surge at the exact moment the grid is under more structural stress than at any point in modern history. And the war in Iran has added a layer of energy cost pressure that did not exist last summer. Natural gas prices, which fuel roughly 43% of U.S. electricity generation, have been climbing because of LNG supply disruptions linked to the Strait of Hormuz closure. The Roosevelt Institute specifically noted that household energy costs rarely fall once they rise because the structural drivers, AI demand, export capacity, aging infrastructure, are all permanent. So what does this mean for your family this summer? It means electric bills that were already $300 to $800 per month in many parts of the country could surge another 15 to 30% during peak summer months. It means the possibility of rolling blackouts in the PJM region and other high-stress areas during heat waves. It means the woman in Ohio whose bill hit $1,300 while she used less energy than the year before is going to see an even higher number this July. And it means that the AI companies that are driving this demand, the same companies whose stock prices are propping up the GDP number, are consuming the electricity that should be powering your home, and they are making you pay for the privilege. An energy policy analyst told NPR that ordinary people are going to end up subsidizing the wealthiest industry in the world. That is not a political statement. That is the mathematical reality of how electricity pricing works in the United States in 2026. And it is coming to your mailbox this summer, in the form of a bill that will make everything that came before it look reasonable. Number 7. The fall harvest will reflect every decision that was made this spring, under impossible conditions, and grocery prices will hit levels that redefine what Americans can afford to eat. I need you to understand something about the food timeline that almost nobody in the media is explaining correctly, because they keep treating grocery prices as a week-to-week news story when it is actually a 6-month pipeline that was already loaded with bad inputs before anybody started paying attention. The food you are eating right now in April 2026 was grown, harvested, and processed before the war in Iran started. The wheat in your bread was planted last fall. The corn that fed the cattle was grown last summer. The fertilizer that produced those crops was purchased at prices that no longer exist. You are living inside the last season of affordable food, and you do not know it. Here is what the pipeline looks like going forward. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for over 5 weeks. That strait carries roughly 1/3 of all seaborne fertilizer trade. The Arabian Gulf accounts for 46% of global urea exports, which is the single most widely used nitrogen fertilizer on the planet. Urea prices have surged 47% since the war started. Morningstar projects that nitrogen fertilizer prices could roughly double from 2024 levels. And China, the world's largest urea supplier, has indicated it may not fully resume exports until August 2026, removing millions of additional tons from global markets. European nitrogen production has been running at about 75% of normal capacity since 2022, because natural gas prices never fully recovered from the Russia-Ukraine war. So all 3 of the world's major fertilizer choke points, the Strait of Hormuz, Chinese export restrictions, and European production capacity, are simultaneously compromised during the single most critical window of the agricultural calendar, planting season. Right now, this month, the FAO gave a 3-month window starting in March before the damage to global crop yields becomes irreversible. That window closes in June, and every farmer in the Northern Hemisphere is making decisions right now about how much fertilizer to apply, how many acres to plant, and whether to plant corn or switch to cheaper-to-grow soybeans. Those decisions are being made under extreme cost pressure and extreme uncertainty. And those decisions made in April and May of 2026 on farms in Iowa and Nebraska and Texas and Indiana will determine what is available on your grocery shelf in September, October, November, and into 2027. A corn farmer in Iowa reported that her nitrogen fertilizer went from $795 per ton just days before the war to $990 per ton by the end of March. She could lose $110 per acre across her 530 acres. Her farm has been in her family for 85 years, and she does not know if it will survive. Farm sector debt was already projected at a record $624.7 billion before the war started. The American Farm Bureau says this is year 4 of consecutive losses, and the average age of an American farmer is 58. Many are asking who will farm this ground when they are gone. Diesel on the farm has increased over $1 per gallon year over year. For a 1,000-acre corn operation, that translates to an additional $9,000 in planting fuel costs alone. And the USDA projected a 3.1% grocery price increase this year, but that estimate was made before the fertilizer crisis, before diesel hit $5.40, before the Strait closed. Goldman Sachs has already revised its inflation forecast upward, and the UN projects global food prices could average 15 to 20% higher in the first half of 2026 if the disruption continues. When those higher input costs work through the supply chain and hit the fall harvest, you are going to see grocery prices in September and October that make today's prices look like a bargain. And there is nothing anyone can do to stop it, because the crops that were not adequately fertilized this spring cannot be retroactively improved. The yield is locked in. The math is done. The food from the world after the war is going to cost you more than anything you have ever paid, and it starts arriving on your table this fall. Number 6. The Federal Reserve Chair transition in May could trigger a constitutional crisis over monetary policy, and your mortgage rate savings account and retirement are all in the crossfire. On May 15, 2026, Jerome Powell's term as chair of the Federal Reserve expires. And what happens next could be one of the most consequential and destabilizing events of the entire year, because it sits at the intersection of monetary policy, presidential politics, institutional independence, and the financial well-being of every single American who has a mortgage, a savings account, a credit card, or a retirement fund. The Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research published an analysis in January warning that this transition is one of the most important economic events of 2026. They noted that Trump has aggressively attacked Powell and the independence of the Fed, stating that his nominee will need to enact his agenda of sharply lowering interest rates. And here is why that matters so much for what happens this summer. If Trump installs a Fed chair who immediately begins cutting rates to satisfy political demands rather than economic conditions, the bond market will react violently. Bond investors price in the credibility of the central bank. When they believe the Fed is making decisions based on data, they accept lower yields because they trust the institution. When they believe the Fed is making decisions based on political pressure, they demand higher yields to compensate for the risk of uncontrolled inflation. And higher bond yields translate directly into higher mortgage rates, higher auto loan rates, higher credit card rates, and higher borrowing costs for the government itself, which makes the deficit worse, which makes the debt worse, which makes the interest payments worse. The Cleveland Federal Reserve president gave a speech in March, warning that the unsustainable path of U.S. fiscal debt poses risks to the dollar's status, and that attempts to pressure the Fed to trim debt service costs through significantly reduced interest rates would risk escalating inflation while providing little deficit reduction. That is a sitting Federal Reserve official publicly warning that the exact thing the president wants to do would make the crisis worse. And Powell has made it clear that he views the Fed's political independence as paramount. His 14-year term as a Fed governor runs until 2028, so he could theoretically choose to remain on the board even after his chair term expires. Stanford noted that very few former chairs have done this, but recent events raise the odds that Powell will stay to serve as a check on political interference. And if Powell stays while a new chair is installed, you could have an unprecedented situation where the outgoing chair is actively resisting the monetary policy direction of the incoming chair on the same board. That is institutional chaos at the exact moment the economy needs institutional stability. And the Rabobank Global Outlook for 2026 said the Federal Reserve's independence is under pressure. There is no plan to reduce the fiscal deficit, and confidence among consumers and businesses is waning. They said the dollar is no longer untouchable for many foreign investors. And the IMF warned in their April consultation that there is little room to cut interest rates given the rise in energy prices and upside risks to commodity prices, and that a monetary policy easing would only be appropriate in the event of a material worsening in labor market prospects alongside a decline in inflationary pressures. Translation: even the IMF is saying rate cuts are not appropriate right now. And if the new Fed chair cuts anyway, to satisfy political demands, the market's response will not be gratitude, it will be fear. Because a central bank that serves the president instead of the economy is a central bank that cannot be trusted. And a central bank that cannot be trusted presides over a currency that loses value, bonds that lose buyers, and an economy that loses the single most important asset it has, credibility. All of this plays out between May and August. And your mortgage rate, your savings rate, your credit card rate, and your retirement account balance are all sitting in the crossfire of a political fight over an institution that was specifically designed to be above politics. And nobody is preparing you for what happens if that design fails. Number 5, millions of Americans are about to lose their health insurance and their food assistance at the same time this summer, and the safety net they thought would catch them does not exist anymore. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was signed into law on July 4, 2025, contains the largest cuts to Medicaid in the history of the program. And the consequences of those cuts are going to start materializing this summer in ways that most Americans have no idea are coming. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that 11.8 million people will directly lose their Medicaid coverage as a result of this legislation. Another 3.1 million will lose coverage under marketplace plans. And an additional 4.2 million could become uninsured if the expanded premium tax credits expire later this year, which they already have. That is nearly 20 million people losing health coverage in a single legislative cycle. And the timeline is not distant. It is happening right now. On January 1, 2026, the law eliminated the enhanced federal matching rate that had incentivized states to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. That 90% federal match, which was the financial engine that made expansion possible in 41 states, is gone. States are now absorbing a larger share of the cost, and many of them cannot afford it. On October 1, 2026, Medicaid eligibility will be narrowed for certain non-citizens. By December 31, 2026, states will be required to conduct eligibility redeterminations every 6 months instead of once a year, which is an administrative burden that experience has shown pushes eligible people off the rolls simply because they could not navigate the paperwork in time. And beginning January 2027, most Medicaid recipients will need to meet work requirements of 80 hours per month to maintain coverage. The Urban Institute estimates that between 10 and 15 million people could lose coverage from the work requirements alone because the systems to verify compliance do not exist in most states. KFF Health News reported that states are now racing to update their eligibility computer systems to comply, many of them hiring consulting firms like Deloitte at costs of tens of millions of dollars per state. And these are the same eligibility systems that have a documented history of errors, sending paperwork to wrong addresses, generating incorrect notices, and freezing for hours at a time. In Illinois alone, state officials estimate 360,000 residents could lose Medicaid coverage. In Wisconsin, 63,000 adults could lose coverage after work requirements take effect. And this is happening at the exact same time that SNAP benefits are being cut. The CBO projects that 2.4 million people will lose access to monthly food assistance. New verification requirements for shelter and utility costs are adding paperwork hurdles that many low-income households will fail to meet, resulting in benefit reductions even for people who still technically qualify. And the Commonwealth Fund and George Washington University published a joint analysis showing that the combined Medicaid and SNAP cuts could trigger the loss of over 1 million jobs nationwide in 2026. State economies would lose $113 billion in gross domestic product. 477,000 healthcare jobs would be eliminated. 143,000 food sector jobs would disappear. And state and local tax revenues would drop by $8.8 billion. That means the cuts designed to save money will cost more money than they save because the economic damage cascades through communities, hospitals, grocery stores, and tax bases. And this is landing on families this summer, who already cannot afford their health care and their groceries simultaneously. When a family loses Medicaid, they do not just lose their insurance card. They lose their ability to fill prescriptions, see a doctor, treat a chronic condition, or take their child to the pediatrician. And when that same family loses SNAP benefits in the same month, they also lose the $188 a month that was keeping food on the table. And they are pushed toward food banks that are already overwhelmed, already seeing double the demand from 5 years ago, and already losing federal funding. That is what is coming this summer. 2 lifelines being cut at the same time for the same families in the same communities, and nobody is preparing them for it because the people who pass the law are not the ones who will feel its consequences. Number 4, AI layoff wave is about to accelerate into the summer hiring season, and the jobs that disappear this time are not coming back. In March 2026, artificial intelligence became the #1 cited reason for job eliminations in the United States for the first time in history, according to Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, the firm that has tracked layoff announcements for decades. AI accounted for 25% of all announced job cuts that month. Goldman Sachs estimates that AI is currently displacing roughly 16,000 American jobs every single month. And the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research published data showing that the unemployment rate for 20 to 24-year-olds has risen 1.2 percentage points from a year ago, while prime-age worker unemployment is essentially unchanged, suggesting that the youngest workers are absorbing the first blow of AI displacement in a way that is historically unprecedented. Previous recessions hit young and old workers at roughly similar rates. This cycle is targeting the entry-level workers, specifically because their tasks, data entry, basic analysis, customer communication, content production, scheduling, report generation are the exact tasks that AI does cheapest and fastest. And here is what makes the summer timeline critical. June through August has traditionally been the seasonal hiring peak in the United States. Retailers staff up for back to school. Hospitality surges for summer travel. Construction accelerates in warm weather. Temporary employment agencies fill seasonal roles across dozens of industries. That seasonal hiring pattern has been one of the most reliable labor market signals for 40 years. And this summer, it is going to be dramatically weaker than at any point in recent memory, because companies are not going to hire humans for tasks they can now accomplish with AI tools that cost a fraction of a full-time employee. A customer service department that used to hire 50 seasonal workers is going to deploy an AI chatbot that handles 80% of inquiries and hire 10 humans for the remainder. A marketing department that used to bring on summer interns for content creation is going to use generative AI to produce the content internally. An accounting firm that used to hire temporary staff for mid-year reviews is going to automate the process. McKinsey estimated that up to 30% of hours worked globally could be automated by 2030. That is 3.5 years away. And every summer between now and then is going to see a progressive shrinking of the seasonal hiring surge that millions of families depend on for supplemental income. And the RBC economics team flagged something that I think is critically important for understanding what happens this summer. They said spending power in the United States is increasingly concentrated in a very specific cohort, the baby boomer generation, through non-labor income like dividends, interest, and rent. The top 10% of earners are driving consumption, while everyone below them is being squeezed. That means the economy looks like it is growing from the top, while it is actually contracting from the middle down. And the people in the middle, the 25 to 45-year-olds who should be entering their prime earning years, are facing a labor market that is replacing them at the exact moment they need it most. They have student debt averaging $94,000. They have mortgages at 6.5%. They have car payments at $742. They have health insurance that just doubled. And now the seasonal jobs that used to bridge the gap between paychecks are being automated by the same companies whose stock prices are propping up the GDP number. That contradiction, a growing economy with fewer opportunities for the people living inside it, is going to become acutely visible this summer when the seasonal hiring numbers come in weaker than anyone expected. And by then it will be too late to pivot, because the AI systems that replace those jobs were deployed this spring, and they are not being removed. Number 3. Gas prices are going to hit levels this summer that will fundamentally change how Americans live, move, and spend, and there is no policy that can stop it before August. I want to show you the math on gasoline prices this summer, because I think most people are looking at $4.08 at the pump right now and thinking that is the peak. It is not the peak, it is the floor, and the ceiling is significantly higher than most Americans are psychologically prepared for. Diesel is already at $5.40 nationally and over $7 in California. Gas is at $4.08 and climbing. And the structural reasons for those prices have not been addressed because they cannot be addressed in the time frame that matters. The Strait of Hormuz remains functionally closed to most commercial traffic. Iran has confirmed mines in the shipping lanes. Traffic is running at roughly 8% of normal volume according to the Dupree report. War risk insurance premiums for tankers have surged 20 to 40 times their pre-war levels. And the crude that American refineries need, the heavy sour grade from the Middle East that 70% of U.S. refinery capacity was built to process, is not arriving. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which was the government's emergency tool for exactly this kind of disruption, has already been drawn down. The IEA coordinated the release of 400 million barrels, the largest drawdown in history, and it barely moved the needle because the problem is not total oil supply, it is crude compatibility. American shale oil is the wrong grade for the refineries that produce diesel and jet fuel, and redesigning that refinery hardware would take years and hundreds of billions of dollars. So the price of gas is not going to come down because of a policy announcement or a tweet or a release from the reserve. It is going to continue climbing as summer driving season arrives. The EIA tracks this every year. Americans drive more miles between Memorial Day and Labor Day than any other period. Demand for gasoline surges 5 to 8% seasonally during the summer months. And this summer, that demand surge is going to collide with a supply constraint that has no precedent in modern history. PNC Financial's chief economist said that if oil reaches $150 per barrel, the odds of recession top 50%. Brent crude has already touched $126. And if the war escalates or the ceasefire fractures or the strait remains contested through June and July, $150 is not a fringe scenario. It is a plausible one. And at $150 crude, gas prices at the pump could hit $6 to $7 nationally. California could see $8 to $9. And diesel, which powers every truck that delivers every product to every store in the country, could exceed $8 nationally. Think about what that means for a family that commutes 30 miles each way to work in a vehicle that gets 25 miles per gallon. At $4 gas, that commute costs $9.60 per day, or roughly $200 per month. At $6 gas, it cost $14.40 per day, or $300 per month. That is an additional $100 to $136 per month that comes directly out of a family budget that is already running a deficit. And that does not include the cascading cost of diesel on everything they buy. When diesel goes up $1, trucking costs go up 16 to 20 cents per mile for every load. That increase gets built into the price of food, medicine, clothing, building materials, furniture, appliances, and every single item sold in every store. A family of 4 could easily absorb an additional $300 to $500 per month in combined direct fuel costs and indirect price increases by August. For a household earning $80,000 a year, that is a 4.5 to 7.5% reduction in disposable income in a single summer. And for the families who are already running on fumes, who are already choosing between groceries and gas, who are already one paycheck away from missing rent, this is the shock that pushes them over the edge. And there is no policy lever that changes this before August, because the physical infrastructure that would need to exist to bring prices down, reopen shipping lanes, compatible refinery capacity, rebuilt reserves, none of it can be created in 4 months. The price of gas this summer is already baked in. You just have not received the bill yet. Number 2, midterm campaign season will weaponize every crisis on this list. Instead of solving it, and the political chaos will make everything worse at the exact moment you need stability. Gallup published its 2026 expectations survey, and the numbers should alarm every single person in this country regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum. Americans' predictions for 2026 are considerably more negative than they were for 2025, with double-digit declines in positive expectations across multiple dimensions. The sharpest collapse was in employment expectations. The percentage of Americans who expect full or increasing employment fell 18 points in a single year, from 54% to 36%. Expectations that taxes will fall dropped 14 points. Expectations for economic prosperity dropped 14 points, from 44% to 30%. And a majority of Americans now believe the country is already in a recession, even though technically it is not. 71% rate the state of the economy as fair or poor, according to Brookings. Only 24% think the economy is getting better. 53% think it is getting worse. And only 29% believe they and their families will be better off a year from now. That is not a country entering a normal midterm election cycle. That is a country entering a political season while standing on an economic fault line. And here is why the midterm campaign is going to make everything I described in this video worse instead of better. Oxford Economics published an analysis noting that midterm voters seem to form their opinion about the economy during the summer and fall. How the economy and especially the labor market performs over the next few months will increasingly influence the outcome on Election Day. That means every politician running for office this summer has a direct incentive to make the economy the centerpiece of their campaign. And making the economy the centerpiece of a campaign does not mean fixing it. It means talking about it, loudly, constantly, in the most alarming terms possible. Because alarm drives turnout, fear drives donations, and outrage drives votes. Both parties will spend hundreds of millions of dollars between June and November telling you how terrible the economy is while doing absolutely nothing to make it better. Democrats will blame the war, the tariffs, the Medicaid cuts, and the ACA subsidy expiration. Republicans will blame inflation, government spending, and immigration. And neither side will pass a single piece of legislation that addresses any of the 10 things I just told you about, because Congress is heading into the most politically polarized midterm season in modern history, with a record 56 out of 535 members not even seeking re-election. NPR reported that a majority of the public already thinks the country is in a recession. Democrats benefited at the ballot box in 2025, winning special elections and gubernatorial races. The party in power has historically borne the brunt of political punishment in tough times. And Trump's approval on inflation is at 38%. on the economy at 26% positive, and on trade policy at 36%. That means the political incentive structure this summer is designed to amplify panic, not reduce it. When a sitting senator goes on television and says American families are suffering, they are not saying it to fix the suffering, they are saying it to fundraise off the suffering. And that amplification of economic anxiety has a direct, measurable effect on consumer behavior. Morgan Stanley flagged that stock markets do not like uncertainty in the lead-up to midterms, and that 2026's elections add to an already uncertain policy outlook. When consumers are bombarded with messaging about how bad the economy is, they spend less. When they spend less, the economy actually gets worse. And when the economy gets worse, the messaging gets louder. That is a doom loop powered by campaign advertising, and it runs from June to November without a pause button. Every single crisis I have walked you through in this countdown, the commercial real estate wave, the GDP report, the power grid strain, the food price surge, the Fed transition, the Medicaid cuts, the AI layoffs, the gas prices, every one of them will be used as a political weapon this summer. Not as a problem to solve, but as ammunition to fire at the other side. And while they are firing at each other, your family will be standing in the crossfire, trying to figure out how to pay for gas and groceries and health insurance and electricity and rent on a paycheck that has not changed in 2 years. That is what is coming this summer. Political chaos layered on top of economic fragility. And history shows that this combination does not produce solutions. It produces paralysis. Number 1. All 10 of these things are hitting the same family budget at the same time, in the same 3-month window, and that is what makes this summer unlike anything America has experienced since 2008. All 10 of these events are landing on your family between June and September of 2026 simultaneously. They cover each one in isolation. The gas prices are one segment. The food costs are another. The electric bill is a local news story. The Medicaid cuts are a policy debate. The AI layoffs are a tech story. The commercial real estate wave is a business section footnote. And the GDP report is a number that scrolls across the bottom of a screen while someone talks about something else. But they are not separate stories. They are the same story happening at the same time to the same people. Let me show you what this looks like for one family. A household earning $85,000 with 2 working adults, 2 children, a mortgage, 1 car payment, and employer-provided health insurance. In June, their gas costs increase $100 to $136 per month as summer driving season collides with $5 to $6 gas. Their electric bill, which was already $400 in April, surges to $550 to $700 during the summer heat wave as grid strain drives prices higher and AI data centers consume the capacity that was supposed to power their neighborhood. Their grocery bill, which was already $800 per month, starts climbing toward $950 as the fertilizer-depleted fall harvest enters the supply chain and food prices absorb the diesel surcharge and the reduced yields. Their employer tells them in September that health insurance premiums for 2027 will increase 7 to 9% and the deductible is going up $500. One of their children's summer jobs, the seasonal retail position that was supposed to help pay for school supplies, does not exist this year because the company automated the role with an AI system deployed in March. The morning news is saturated with midterm campaign ads telling them the economy is collapsing while offering no plan to address any of it. And through every one of these hits, their household income has not changed. It has not gone up, it has not adjusted for inflation, it is the same $85,000 it was in January. And by August, the math no longer works. The checking account that used to have $400 left at the end of the month now has negative $200. The credit card that was at $3,000 is now at $5,500. The 401k contribution that was $200 per paycheck has been paused. The doctor's appointment that was scheduled for July has been canceled because the copay went up and there is nothing left after the bills. And this family is not poor. They are not irresponsible. They are not living beyond their means. They are a 2-income household with a college education and a 15-year work history that is being mathematically overwhelmed by the simultaneous convergence of forces that no individual family was designed to absorb. That is what is coming this summer. Not one crisis. 10 crises, all at once, all landing on the same paycheck, all within the same 90-day window. And it is too late to stop any of them because the commercial real estate loans are already maturing, the GDP data is already being collected, the grid capacity is already insufficient, the crops are already being planted with inadequate fertilizer, the Fed chair transition is already scheduled, the Medicaid redeterminations are already being processed, the AI systems are already deployed, The gas supply constraint is already structural, and the campaign ads are already bought. Every single one of these dominoes was set in motion months ago. And this summer they fall. I know this video was a lot. I know it was long. I know some of it was hard to hear. But I genuinely believe that the people who are going to come through what is ahead are not the ones with the most money or the best connections. They are the ones who saw it coming while there was still time to prepare. And you just saw it. So use the time you have left. Pay down debt. Build a cash buffer, even if it starts at $25 a week. Stock your pantry with what you already eat. Audit your bills for charges you can eliminate. Have the money conversation with your family this weekend. Not next month, this weekend. Because by June, the conversation will be about survival, not strategy. Share this video with the people you care about. Not for the views, not for the algorithm. Because somewhere right now, there is a family that looks exactly like the one I just described, and they have no idea what is about to hit them. And the difference between being blindsided and being prepared is one conversation, one video, one moment of clarity, and you just had yours. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because every single one of these timelines is going to unfold in real time over the next 90 days, and I am going to be here tracking every one of them as they develop. No spin, no agenda, no political filter. Just the data, the timeline, and the truth. Take care of yourselves out there. Protect your families, strengthen your circle, and I will see you in the next one.